Hey everybody, how are you guys doing today? So we are back today with our discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. For anybody who's new, this is the version that I'm using. You can use any version you want. There probably are better translations, but this is what I've got. My hair's looking a bit like I stuck my finger in an electrical socket today because it's just very humid and I can't do anything about it. So I decided that I'm going to set a good example for everyone and practice equanimity, which is something we're going to be talking about today. So as usual, we'll go through I'll read through the chapter. It's not long, and then we'll discuss a little bit about it, and then we can take some questions. Hopefully keep the stream maybe like an hour or less, I think is Timmy says I look charged. Oh my gosh, it's the trials and tribulations of having long hair in a humid climate. What can you do? Anyway, so today is chapter 4, the Yoga of Wisdom. And I just want to point out something. When we're talking about yoga, because it's a word that comes up a lot in this book, yoga means union. It's the union of all-encompassing wisdom. So when we talk about yoga, that's what we mean. We're not referring to getting on a yoga mat. Just in case anybody didn't understand that. So, all right, let's read through this. It's not a particularly long chapter. It's a little bit dry though, so we'll see how we go. The blessed Lord said, I taught this imperishable doctrine to Vivasvat, god of the sun, more than 100 billion years ago. Vivasvat told it to Manu, father of humans. Manu, to King Ikshvaku, transmitted it from one generation to the next. It was known for eons. To all the primeval wise men, the seers, and philosopher kings. But over the dwindling ages, the doctrine has been lost, Arjuna. This is the ancient doctrine that I have taught to you today, since you are my devotee and friend. This is the innermost doctrine. Arjuna said, but you were born countless eons later than the god of the sun. How then is it possible that you taught this doctrine to him? The blessed Lord said, many times have I been born, and many times you have also. All these lives I remember, you recall only this one. Although I am unborn, deathless, the infinite Lord of all beings, through my own wondrous power I come into finite form. Whenever righteousness falters and chaos threatens to prevail, I take on a human body and manifest myself on earth. In order to protect the good, to destroy the doers of evil, to ensure the triumph of righteousness, in every age I am born. Whoever knows profoundly my divine presence on earth is not reborn when he leaves the body, but comes to me. Released from greed, fear, anger, absorbed in me and made pure by the practice of wisdom, many have attained my own state of being. However men try to reach me, I return their love with my love. Whatever path they may travel, it leads to me in the end. Wishing success in their actions, men sacrifice to the gods, for ritual can bring success quickly in the world of men. I founded the 4 caste system with the gunas appropriate to each. Although I did this, know that I am the eternal non-doer. Actions cannot defile me, since I am indifferent to results. All those who understand this will not be bound by their actions. This is how actions were done by the ancient seekers of freedom. Follow their example. Act, surrendering the fruits of action. What are action and inaction? This matter confuses even wise men, so I will teach you and free you from any harm. You must realize what action is, what wrong action and inaction are as well. The true nature of action is profound and difficult to fathom. He who can see inaction in the midst of action and action in the midst of inaction is wise and can act in the spirit of yoga. With no desire for success, no anxiety about failure, indifferent to results, he burns up his actions in the fire of wisdom. Surrendering all thoughts of outcome, unperturbed, self-reliant, he does nothing at all, even when fully engaged in actions. There is nothing that he expects, nothing that he fears. Serene, free from possessions, untainted, acting with the body alone, content with whatever happens, unattached to pleasure or pain, success or failure, he acts and is never bound by his action. When a man has let go of attachments, when his mind is rooted in wisdom, everything he does is worship, and his actions all melt away. God is the offering. God is the offered, poured out by God. God is attained by all those who see God in every action. Some men of yoga pray to the gods and make this their worship. Some offer worship by worship itself in the fire of God. Others offer their senses in the fire of self-abnegation. Others offer the senses objects in the fire of the senses. Others offer all actions in the senses and of the breath, in the fire kindled by wisdom of the yoga of self-restraint. Some offer wealth, austerities, their practice of yoga. Others, ascetics, offer their studies of the scriptures and wisdom itself. Others, intent on control of their vital forces, offer their in-breath into their out-breath, or their out-breath into their in-breath. Others, while fasting, offer their in-breath to their in-breath. All these understand worship. By worship, these are cleansed of sin. Partaking of the essence of worship, forever they are freed of themselves. But non-worshippers cannot be happy in this world or in any other. Thus, many forms of worship may lead to freedom, Arjuna. All these are born of action. When you know this, you will be free. Better than any ritual is the worship achieved through wisdom. Wisdom is the final goal of every action, Arjuna. Find a wise teacher, honor him, ask him your questions, serve him. Someone who has seen the truth will guide you on the path to wisdom. When you realize it, you will never fall back into delusion. Knowing it, you see all beings in yourself and yourself in me. Even if you were the most evil of evildoers, Arjuna, wisdom is the boat that would carry you across the sea of all sin. Just as firewood is turned into ashes in the flame of a fire, all actions are turned to ashes in wisdom's refining flames. Nothing in the world can purify as powerfully as wisdom. Practiced in yoga, you will find this wisdom within yourself. Resolute, restraining his senses, the man of faith becomes wise. Once he attains true wisdom, he soon attains perfect peace. Ignorant men without faith are easily mired in doubt. They can never be truly happy in this world or the world beyond. A man is not bound by action who renounces action through yoga, who concentrates on the self and whose doubt is cut off by wisdom. Therefore, with the sword of wisdom, cut off this doubt in your heart. Follow the path of selfless action. Stand up, Arjuna. So, we have, last time we talked about renouncing the fruits of action. And so this is kind of going a little bit deeper into the concept of what action and inaction are. And he's talking a lot about that. So he starts off the chapter. First of all, he starts off, he's kind of establishing the credibility of the wisdom that he's going to impart to Arjuna. He's demonstrating with what he's saying about how it was passed down, that this is once part of an initiatic chain. And that initiatic chain started with Krishna himself. So, he says, however men try to reach me, I return their love with my love. Whatever path they may travel, it leads to me in the end. And he goes on and he lists all of these different forms of worship, that some men worship like this and some worship like that. And, some people fast, or some people pray, or some people do breath work, or, whatever they do. And he's saying all these paths will eventually lead back to me. And, even for the atheist, that path still leads back. Those who deny the existence of God will meet God in the form of their own karma. Whereas those who surrender fully to God, God can destroy that karma and bestow divine love. Oh, one of my notes is upside down here for some reason. So he says that Krishna says that actions cannot defile him because he's indifferent to results. And he says that this is how actions were done by the ancient seekers of freedom. The thing about actions is that they bind you to karma if those actions are performed with the intent of enjoying results from them. When those actions are performed simply to please God, to fulfill your duty without that attachment, then that action does not generate karma. So he says to Arjuna that you have to realize what action, wrong action, and inaction are. So there are three Sanskrit words. The first is karma, which is obviously the root of karma, right? So karma is auspicious action. It's action that purifies the mind and the soul. Then there's vikarm, which is prohibited action that harms the soul, things that are sinful, that you should not ever do. And then there's akarm, so action without attachment, which is, as I said, done only to please God or to fulfill a dharmic duty that you have. And this type of action does not come with karmic consequences. He says, he who can see inaction in the midst of action and action in the midst of inaction is wise and can act in the spirit of yoga. I remember the first time I read this book, that passage really grabbed me. And I didn't immediately understand what it really meant. I mean, on a surface level, you can look at it from the perspective of, that phrase, like, don't just sit there, do something. Sometimes it's that rushing to do something that is worse than not doing anything. Whereas sometimes it's better to, don't just do something, sit there. And in that case, sometimes you're making that inaction into a conscious choice. And initially that's how I interpreted it. But, as Krishna says, the true nature of action is profound and difficult to fathom. And so we can go a lot deeper into this. And Krishna does, of course, go quite deep into trying to explain this. So action and inaction that would be like if you're giving up your duties because they're burdensome, but your mind is continuing to dwell on sense objects. So what Arjuna is doing, where he wants to give up his duty to fight because he just doesn't want to, that would be action in inaction. It's a lethargic idleness, and that is a type of sinful action. Whereas the opposite, inaction in action, that is essentially acting without attachment and doing one's duty. And if you are acting with the intent to obtain divine bliss, or, even a motivation like that, which, it's a good thing. There's nothing wrong, morally speaking, with wanting that, but it's still a desire. And in that desire, you end up entangled in karma. So you can have a desire for divine bliss. You can take actions toward divine bliss. But if it's done with that motivation in mind, and you are attached to that as the outcome, you're not really breaking free. You're still getting entangled in that karmic cycle. He talks a lot about, all of these different types of sacrifice and worship. And one of the things that he mentions that I really liked is that this idea of offering your own self as a sacrifice. And those with a deep understanding of sacrifice and surrender are making this offering of themselves. It is essentially a complete surrender to God. And it's something we'll discuss more at the end of the book. But there's also this concept of, when he's talking about, offering the senses into the fire of the senses, like, it's very poetic, but what does it actually mean, right? It's this idea that the fire of self-discipline burns up the senses. And the more you discipline yourself in the use of your senses, the less control they have over you. The more you purify your mind, the more you're able to act without attachment. Another way of using the senses is if you use the senses to perceive God in all things. So, all of these paths, he says, lead back to God. Of course, there are people who simply just perform the physical acts of devotion, but they're not being performed with proper knowledge in a way that purifies the mind. So it's not bad to perform acts of devotion without knowledge, but it's not necessarily getting you where you need to go. So when we say knowledge, we're talking about experiential knowledge, not theoretical knowledge. We're talking about the knowledge you get when you have an experience of the numinous. And Krishna's saying, find a wise teacher to guide you on the path of wisdom, someone who's seen the truth himself. This is the problem I have with modern religions. Like, people ask me all the time, well, why don't you just choose a path? Why don't you commit to a particular path? It is very difficult in this age to find a spiritual teacher who is willing and able to do that, who has themselves seen the truth. And what's lacking in so many religions today is a pathway to that experience of the numinous. There's a lot of dogma and moralizing and a lot of preaching about how, we need to worship God, but nobody can see God. They don't know how to teach people to see God and have that experience. And it's through that experience that you gain divine knowledge. So this divine knowledge is really important because that's what burns up our karma. That's what leads us to surrender to God. You can't fully surrender to God if you've never had even an experience of God. You know what I mean? So Krishna's saying, there's nothing wrong with just faith, but experiential knowledge plus faith is the best. Faith on its own, it's okay. But if you have neither, then he's saying you will have no peace in this life or the next. And he ends with this sort of dual command to Arjuna to both take action and refrain from action, which leaves Arjuna a little bit confused, and we'll explore that in the next chapter. But, I want to say somebody mentioned this in maybe the first live stream that we did on the Bhagavad Gita, but it's something that comes up a lot, and I want to address it. So one of the biggest objections that people have to this idea of renouncing the fruits of your actions is that if you let go of the motivation to act, then you will just cease to act. It's like they think that if you let go of that motivating factor of a possible reward, then people will just sit around doing nothing. For many people, that's probably true. Most people don't act unless they think they're going to get something out of it, right? But having that wisdom, that divine knowledge, is what helps you to overcome the need for motivation. And there's a sort of knowing that the world's going to unfold as it will, and there's this sense of divine justice. So, for example, let's say that you are a salesman and you're working really hard in sales to make money. Maybe you're like commission based or something. So when you make a sale, that's when you get paid. So what happens is that when a customer comes in, you're focused on the reward, the money, what you're going to get from the sale, rather than being motivated by helping the person or because you're really passionate about what you're doing. And you get attached to this, I have to make the sale, have to make the sale, have to make the sale. And then what happens is when that person decides not to buy, you experience, you feel like you failed and you drop into despair and, oh no, now I'm not going to get the money and I've been counting on that. And then the next person comes in and you do make the sale. Oh, great, I made the sale. And so there's this roller coaster ride of these ups and downs, and you're always suffering from that. And you have no stability and equanimity. And that's something that comes with the wisdom. When you have that superior wisdom, you don't allow these setbacks to defeat you like that. You don't feel crushed by it. It's to be expected sometimes in life that you experience defeat. Probably the average person experiences more defeat in life than they experience success. Meditation is one example of just repeatedly failing. It's literally the practice of sitting and repeatedly failing. You're supposed to be focusing on your breath or your mantra. Your mind wanders. Oh no, you failed. Just come back to the breath. And many meditation teachers would tell you not to be attached to that. Don't judge the experience. Don't judge yourself for having failed. Just accept that your mind wandered and come back to the breath. Just accept that maybe it wasn't the best meditation ever, but come back to the breath anyway. There's this idea of not judging. So when you act in wisdom, you're acting with the love of the pure effort. You're acting with devotion to something. You're renouncing the results. And in doing that, you actually produce better results because you're not in a state of grasping and craving. And that's when the success finally comes. To go back to our hypothetical salesman, like if a customer comes in the door and he's getting really hyper about this potential big sale, he can often end up driving the customer away because the customer senses that over eagerness and desperation and feels like, oh, this person just wants my money. They don't actually care about helping me. And the salesman, he's not focused on just doing his duty in service to the customer. He's too focused on what he's going to get out of it. And then he loses his sale, right? So one thing that this chapter often reminds me of is an old Chinese parable about the man and the horse. I don't know if you guys know this. It's one of my favorites ever, probably. So the way it goes is that basically there's this old man. He lives in a village. He's very poor, but he has this beautiful white horse. And many people offered him money for it, but he always refused to sell the horse because he considered it like a friend or part of the family. And one day the horse was found to be missing. So all the villagers cried, oh no, it must have been stolen. And they told the old man that he was such a fool for not selling it. And he could have lived in riches. So what a terrible misfortune. I'm sorry about my cat here. You need to get down. Thank you. And so, the old man responds to this, well, maybe, maybe not. We can't know. All we know is that the horse is just not in the stable. We can't judge whether or not this is a good or a bad thing. And after a few weeks, as it turns out, the horse returns from the wilderness and has a dozen other horses following him. So the villagers all gather around and they tell the old man, oh, yes, you were right. Indeed, it turned out that the missing horse has been a blessing because now you have many horses. And the old man says again, maybe, maybe not. We can't know. We can't judge. And so the old man had only one son, and his son set about training the wild horses. But one day he was thrown from the horse and he broke his leg. And again, the villagers all gather to exclaim over this misfortune. Oh, what a disaster to have his son laid up with a broken leg so close to the harvest time. Those horses are surely such a curse, and now you'll be even poorer than ever because your son can't work. And the old man says, maybe, maybe not. We can't know the full picture. We can't judge. And as it so happened, not that long after, the country went to war and all the young men in the village were drafted for the military. Only the old man's son was left because he was crippled. And all the villagers, of course, cry as their sons are taken away for war, knowing they'll probably never see them again. And they're telling the old man, oh, you're so lucky to still have your son. Yeah, he's maybe a bit of a cripple, but at least he's alive and you have him. And again, the old man admonishes them, we can't judge. And only God knows the full story. We only see fragments. We can't judge what's good or bad because we can't see the full picture. We don't know how things will play out. We don't know what good thing will result from a bad thing or what bad thing results from a good thing. So it's better instead to just practice equanimity and detachment so that we don't have to suffer all these emotional ups and downs like the villagers do. And it's this equanimity that keeps this balance of mind for us. And this is what it's about, to renounce the fruits of your actions. It's good for you to do that. It's good to not have to suffer like this. And it's good to act in a way that doesn't entangle you in karma. So with all that said, that's kind of everything I wanted to talk about for this chapter. If people have any questions, I will take them now, and I'll just have a look through the chat to see what you guys had to say. All right. Oil on my hair. No, that's gross. All right. Well, It's nice to see everybody was behaving in the chat. Nobody I have to reprimand or anything like that. Okay, looks like no questions, so it might be a very short stream today. Nick asks which cat. That's my cat. He's the only one that's allowed in this room. My white and fluffy one. The others are sitting outside in the sun, probably waiting for their dinner. I think that's the only reason they care about me, to be honest. Boof Bobo says, how does equanimity go with Olympian striving and struggle? This is a good question. You know, the Olympian nature is to be detached like this. It is to not be mired in the ebb and flow of fortune. And when one attains that Olympian status, you know, the idea of the Olympian leap in the afterlife to join the realms of the gods, you know, you have to kind of cultivate that divine nature. And if you're very invested in what's happening down here in materiality and all the ebb and flow of fate, you know, you're not really in a state of being, you're in a state of becoming. And you're just very invested in everything that's going on down here. So, you know, if you want to be Olympian in nature, you need to cultivate this this spirit of acting with detachment and acting out of a sense of duty, acting for God's pleasure and not yours. And, you know, that in itself is a struggle to do, for sure. So that's kind of like, you know, that's your internal struggle that you go through to try to develop that. Hans Nielsen asks, do we still need physical gurus or can we find one on the inner planes? You know, I'm very skeptical about that kind of stuff. I have heard of people talking about how some spiritual guru came to them or whatever. Like, honestly, how do you know that's not some demonic thing? How do you know that's not even just a product of your own mental hallucinations? Like, you can't know. To me, that's just kind of a big red flag. I personally would stay away from stuff like that. But physical gurus, I mean, that's hard too. There's not many around. Good luck finding one. This is why, you know, Evola kind of took the approach of saying the only real way forward in the Kali Yuga is self-initiation, because all the initiatic chains have been broken. And, you know, without that, what can you do? All that's left is to self-initiate. You know, maybe next week, instead of doing the next chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, maybe we can talk a little bit about Evola in that regard. Pierre asks, origins. To which ethnic group do you ascribe the historic origins of the teachings? If you mean like the Vedic teachings, they are definitely part of the Hyperborean lineage. But if you're talking about like modern ethnic groups, I mean, the people who live in India today are, you know, they're not strictly speaking like Hyperboreans. They are descended from that. That tradition is descended. But what happened in the Indian subcontinent is very similar to what happened in the Mediterranean, where there's this sort of like clash between the northern and solar spiritualities, which is why you get some very chthonic elements in certain expressions of Hinduism today. So, you know, whoever the Indo-Aryans were that brought these kind of Hyperborean ideas down into the rest of the world, like in terms of like what their physical appearance was, I don't really find that a useful thing to ponder about, just because it's overemphasizing biological materiality when we're talking about eternal metaphysical truths. So I don't know if that answers your question. If not, you know, you can ask it again and rephrase it. I accidentally missed Nick's question there. He asked if anger is a trap. As the Buddha said, anger has a honeyed tip and a poisoned root. It's like taking poison and expecting someone else to die. So anger only hurts you. Whether you're angry at an Abrahamic deity, you're angry at another person, like ultimately you're the one that's suffering from that. You're lowering your vibes from that. Julius Flavius asks, are you drawn to the Indian spiritual currents or some other ones, or maybe they're modern reflections? I'm drawn to the Hyperborean spiritual current in whatever form I can find its echoes. And all we can find today, unfortunately, are echoes. But I'm very interested in that. And, I would... there's a particular German writer who did some work on trying to sort of figure out like this sort of primordial or religion. And he had some interesting things to say on astrology as well. So I wish I could get his books in English, because unfortunately my German is just not, like my skills at reading German are just not strong enough to read something quite that dense. Varsaga says, a guru finds you, not the other way around. That is often the case, I think. See what else we've got. That looks... Oh, there's one. This might be our last question. We'll see. Bell Curve asks, before I've acted in self-sacrifice and I've grumbled a lot over the outcomes, how can I overcome this attachment? When people say self-sacrifice, it instantly tells me that they think of themselves a little bit like a martyr, right? Oh, I did so much for so-and-so, I gave so much and they didn't appreciate it. That's often what causes the grumbling. Feeling like you're giving to somebody who doesn't deserve it, feeling like you're not being appreciated enough, feeling like you give more than you get back. And all of this is attachment to results, right? You're like, well, I did this, therefore I should get this. When you act in self-sacrifice, if it's truly with an attitude of service, there shouldn't be that grumbling, right? You should be doing it in a joyful manner, and you should be doing it because it's the right thing to do, it's your duty, it's pleasing to God. Now, there does come a point where if you find that you are grumbling a lot, acting in self-sacrifice, it can sometimes be a sign that you just don't have very good boundaries as well. Like, you should feel okay saying no to people and kind of prioritizing your own self-care as well. If somebody's always asking you to do something for them to the point where you just cringe when you get a text message from them because you're just like, oh no, now what do they want? And or you avoid them because they're always asking something from you. Like, that can be a sign that you need to just like learn to set some better boundaries. But if that's not answering your question, because I'm not sure what you mean about the outcomes that you mentioned, feel free to clarify your question. All right, who else have we got here? Thoughts on the Hare Krishna movement? It started out as a nice thing and became very corrupted, unfortunately. Prabhupada was a great man, a great spiritual teacher. I'm sure he would be rolling in his grave if he saw what had become of, what's now called ISKCON. But I mean, I've attended like Hare Krishna temples, and I know people in those circles, and you can still find good people there. I enjoyed the time that I spent. I mean, I wasn't I wasn't seeking any kind of initiation or really heavily involved with them, but I think it just seems to be a thing in the Kali Yuga. Any spiritual movement, once it gets to a certain size, just attracts a lot of really dodgy people who will exploit and abuse other people. Because, what better place to find victims than a bunch of people who are looking for a spiritual leader and who are very trusting. So it's a shame what happened to it. when it comes to the organization, I kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but they still have a lot of valuable things to offer. Especially here in the West, it's really one of the only entry points into getting to know Vedic spirituality. So that's why I spent some time with them. But yeah, it's definitely got its problems, doesn't it? Question from Anon. Hello, Anon. I see your name all over the internet. You mentioned that seeking of knowledge is action, but what is knowledge in this context? Okay, so I did mention that earlier, but just in case you missed it, we're talking about experiential knowledge of the divine. So this is the kind of knowledge that you get when you have like a numinous experience in meditation, right? When you feel that transcendent connection, and it's a type of knowledge that you can't put into words. It's something that you know to be true because you felt it, you saw it in your mind's eye. It's in your soul, and there's no way to put words to this and to teach it to anyone else. It's just something that has to be experienced. So, for example, a person who says they believe in God because they have faith, right? Which is so many people, but they've never actually experienced God. They've never actually touched anything divine. But for the person who has touched something divine, they have no need for belief and faith because they just know. Jimmy asked, do you think we might see the next Revolt episode anytime soon? Yes, I think you might. So I wanted to record the narration this week, but I had some issues where the microphone was picking up some weird feedback, and I had to get it fixed. It's fixed now, so I'm hoping that I can tackle that this week, maybe Monday or Tuesday. We'll see how we go. It's a lot of I have to make sure like it's quiet. I don't have any roosters crowing in the background or anything, but it also has to be like, it gets really hot in this room if the air conditioner's not running, and I have to have that off if I'm recording. So to sit here and narrate for a couple of hours, trying to just find the time to do that can be a little bit challenging, but I'm ready to do it, and George is ready to do the video editing as soon as possible. So yeah, it should be out. It's on its way. I can't give an exact date yet because I'm not 100% sure, but it is coming. All right. I hate how in StreamYard, I'm like trying to scroll through the comments, but if I hover over it, then I can't read what it actually says. All right. Nick asks, what is the German author's name? Hermann Wirth is his name. Okay, any other questions? Might be our last call for questions. Kind of a small crowd tonight. That's okay, though. It's kind of nice when the chat's like moving at a slower pace and you guys can actually like have conversations with each other, isn't it? Like I hate sitting in like a live stream where there's like 300 or 400 people and the chat's just moving so fast and nobody sees anybody's comments, and it's almost like, then what's the point? Okay, well, I don't know what this question means. Are you a snow bunny? What is that? Nick asks for the spelling. Let's see. I am going to use this opportunity to test out banners on here. Tell me if you guys can see a banner. No, I don't think so. I don't think it worked. There we go. That's his name. All right. Yes, hello. Look who's here to say hello. Haven't seen you on camera in a while. You coming just in time to say goodbye? Okay. Well, I think that's it. I think we're done for today, and we'll be back next Saturday, most likely, and I will decide whether or not, I don't know, do you guys want to keep going with the Bhagavad Gita, or do you want to break it up with something different? I had somebody bring me some Evola books, so I was considering maybe doing something with one of those. But you guys can let me know in the comments what you'd like for next week, and also let me know if there's even a better time for doing this. I kind of just pick Saturday evenings because I have no life and I don't do anything. But, you know, if another day works better, we can do that too. And I think it's time for me to take this kitty out for his walk. Otherwise, he's going to get more and more pesty. So, all right. You guys have a good rest of your weekend.